Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special Zoom edition of Pandemic Proofing Your Portfolio on the Wizards of Dalal Street. I'm Ramesh Damani. Good style is saying complicated things in a simple way. Well, to help us simplify the rocky road of investing with its many hairpin detours, I'm joined today by the CIO of SBI Mutual Funds, Navneet Munot. Navneet, thank you so much for joining us on Wizards.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Navneet, when you were a kid growing up in Rajasthan many moons ago, your dad told you, "Har price ko cheez kehta hai." The Nifty at 9,200. What is that price telling you, Navneet?
So that was in the context of that you should be tracking every market, every price, and because what it's conveying, the economics originally was all about demand and supply and prices, that one single number which tells you a lot of dynamics, a lot of dimensions. And price is like a collective wisdom of crowd till the time it becomes the many of a mob. I think at 9,300, so we are up like 20% from the bottom. Maybe that's faith in human ingenuity, that there is going to be some solution to this crisis. Maybe it's a result of a lot of liquidity which has been unleashed by global central banks and of course the fiscal stimulus. And third, maybe at those levels valuations became quite attractive, which resulted in some bit of buying coming in. The other way to look at 92 or 9,300, wherever we are down like 20%. 25% from the peak, because still there is a lot of uncertainty as far as the trajectory of this crisis is concerned, the near-term impact on the economy, the longer-term implications of this crisis, so on and so forth. From a global perspective, I would say for anyone to turn bullish on emerging markets like India, one would be watching maybe peaking of US dollar, maybe bottoming of US Treasury yield, and some bit of a stabilization in oil and other commodity prices. That will be good for emerging markets, including India. And for India particularly, I think we have all been waiting and watching how a fiscal stimulus comes around.
Navneet, there's a debate going on across many countries, lives or livelihood. What is the government to protect at this point? Now, 6 weeks into our lockdown, what is more important, protecting our lives or the livelihoods?
So in the initial phase, everybody thought that social distancing is the only way out. It also gave us a period to understand how do we deal with this crisis. But my view is that the public discourse will start shifting from survival only to revival, which means that we have to look beyond cure, because a vaccine will take some time, as some big breakthrough on the medication, or maybe even a test kit or something, antibody test particularly, will take some time. And I think gradually we'll have to start learning to live with it. And God forbid, if there is a second wave, there is a third wave, maybe after 2 years there is another corona. So we have to learn to live with it. And I give you an analogy of, let's say, road travel or an air travel, how we have put the infrastructure and the way we travel to ensure that risk is minimized. And I think the public discourse will start moving towards it. From an economist perspective, so the stringency on the in terms of lockdown, etc., will contain the health damage, but on the same time it will have a severe damage on the economic side, and it's a difficult trade-off between these two. And I'm sure everywhere in the world, governments, policymakers are trying to do that. I think in India also, I think over a period of time we'll have to start making some of those trade-offs. Interestingly, my view is that a lot of innovation needs to happen on something like a protective gear, more on disinfection, more on maybe sanitization, and then maybe some breakthroughs may come there, so that people can come back to work without endangering too many lives. I think the one thing I'll add, I think the old and vulnerable, if we can think about how do we take care of them, then a larger part of economy can come back to normalcy.
Right, Navneet, but you've argued many times in the recent days that the government should be using not monetary policy anymore, but fiscal policy in order to tide over the crisis. Can you explain why not monetary policy, and what about fiscal policy? What levers would you like the government to use?
No, in India's case, the first heavy lifting had to be done by the monetary policy, which we are doing, though we may need to do a lot more. I think that was more in the global context, and that was the view even before the corona crisis, that over the last 11 years, since global financial crisis, central banks have been pursuing an extraordinary accommodative monetary policy. I mean, they have probably used all kinds of tools which otherwise they wouldn't have used. Because of this crisis, again, they had to do what they have been doing for last 11 years, maybe much more forcefully. The mantle of growth has to shift to the fiscal policy globally. They are the ones who have to invest maybe in infrastructure so that new jobs get created. And just to take a point, I mean, in US economy in last couple of weeks have lost more number of jobs than the number of jobs that it created post-global financial crisis. Situation is that severe. And my view is that globally, fiscal policy will have to assume a larger role to ensure that growth comes back and growth is more sustainable. It creates more jobs, it reduces inequality by investing in digital infrastructure, health infrastructure, physical infrastructure, even invest. And at some point in time in 2020 or 21, I think that's a new normal we are going to see. They'll be supported by the monetary policy, but I think a bigger heavy lifting will have to be done by the governments world over. India is slightly different because we had a lot of leeway on the monetary policy side also.
Because interest rates were higher?
Because over the last couple of years, we've been keeping real rates positive. I mean, we had this monetary policy committee framework. If you remember, till few months back, I think till June or so, we had liquidity in negative territory in the banking system. Now, I think RBI had a huge amount of leeway to pump liquidity into the system, to cut interest rates. There's a lot more that needs to be done because there is still a lot of disconnect between the macro liquidity and what I call micro liquidity. The transmission is not happening because the money is getting funneled through the banking system and it's getting choked there. So a lot of other tools may have to be tried. Apart from whatever we have done in terms of moratorium, restructuring, these TLTRO and all, but a lot more will have to be done to ensure that money actually reaches where it is needed, both by the government as well as RBI together.
Navneet, let's talk about the fiscal policy. In terms of fiscal policy, it's tax rates, it's terms of budget deficits. Do you see tax rates of taxes going up in India because of Corona? Because unless you do a tax cut, how are you going to stimulate the economy?
I think it's tough. I think because we just cut the corporate tax rate to bring a lot of global corporations to India to support the private investments. The individual income tax has already been raised, I think, to probably levels which we have not seen for a very, very long time. Unlikely that we have the leeway to really increase taxes. What we have to work on is ensure that we look at a multiplier effect of the money that we are spending. These are extraordinary times which need extraordinary or unusual solutions. We have to look at multiplier effect of our spending, and a good part of that borrowing has to be taken by the RBI directly. We have never done that for the last 20-25 years, but as I mentioned, unusual times demand unusual response. And for that, it's critical that the places where money is getting spent has a huge multiplier effect. Maybe a shovel-ready capital projects where you can spend money and get employment created and spend that money from NREGA. So substantial increase in the allocation on NREGA so that you have employment creation which boosts your consumption and a productive asset get created. And we have to think more innovatively. Maybe government puts all the PSUs in a holding company and then borrow money or raise money against it. All the PSU banks put in a holding company, raise money against it to recapitalize banks. We'll have to find every possible solution. In fact, if I can add one more, Ramesh, here, it's like our FX reserves are very, very comfortable. I mean, we have a humongous reserves, and these are the times.
$500 billion.
Exactly. Why do you build these reserves for these kind of times? Can we buy crude oil from that? Can we create a fund which can put in maybe an equity capital or a junior bond kind of thing in financial system or in the other corporates, NBFCs and some of the other MSMEs? I think we should explore all possible options to get that multiplier effect, because my fear is that we'll have a P&L recession. What we need to do with all policymakers, we don't allow it to become a balance sheet recession, because that takes much longer to repair, and that's a much more painful, because in that case the potential growth rate itself comes down. So we have to be bold and innovative and creative in our solutions.
You know, you said buy more oil, Navneet, but I'm afraid there's no place to store that oil. That might be a problem. But let's move ahead.
So maybe that's a good idea. Why don't we spend NREGA money and create those wells? I mean, it will create an asset, while you buy that in the forward market, and maybe you take the delivery a few quarters later, by the time when the wells are ready, and also you create an asset and you create jobs. You spend money, and maybe that company which has been set up to create those strategic reserves, maybe that can raise the money.
Good point. You refer here to what Keynes fondly called the paradox of thrift, right? It takes the central government or the central bank to play the lead role and spend rather than save in these troubled times.
So the paradox of thrift, or you can call it the paradox of deleveraging, is that in these times, what is rational for households and corporates may not be good for the society as a whole. So every household, every business will be very thrifty. They would like to deleverage, and they would like to spend less. They would like to defer their expenditure. But if everybody is doing it, it's not good for the economy. In that situation, there is only one balance sheet which has the capacity and the ability to borrow money, raise resources, and spend money. And at this point in time, you need to pump in capital, and you need to pump in a lot of confidence. And when you do these two together, you ensure that even the household and corporates won't be as thrifty as they would be otherwise if you don't do that. So the third balance sheet, government will have to really take the leverage at this point in time. Now people will be worried about currency, about the impact on interest rates, crowding out private investment, what happens to our rating. But I'm sure rating agencies also understand the new dynamics and the new world we are in. And also at this point in time, it's important we don't allow our potential growth rate to go down substantially.
Yeah, Navneet, you talked about the fiscal deficit getting blown because of spending. Prior to CV, there was all talk of privatization of BPCL and Container Corporation. Given how much the world has changed in the last 3 months, would the government still pursue privatization? Because countries in the West are nationalizing their assets. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think globally the big state is back to me. I think a lot of businesses will get nationalized. But in India, I think still we have a long way to go as far as the strategic divestment is concerned. The intent was right. Unfortunately, the new scenario getting unfold after the corona crisis, it will make it difficult for the government to pursue the strategic divestment. I mean, you can still do it, but you wouldn't really get the value that some of these assets have. In that case, maybe we'll have to think more creatively. As I mentioned, maybe government puts all of these holdings in a holding company, take the money maybe from Reserve Bank of India today, and then maybe put different kind of governance structure around it, and over a period of time that new board takes a decision on which asset to be utilized in what manner, how do we raise resources in the most efficient manner which is good for the society.
You know, Navneet, in talking about efficiency, the largest market cap of the country, Reliance, the market cap is equal to probably all the listed public sector companies. Do you think there's an extreme divergence of valuations here, that the favored stocks keep getting richer while the underperforming stocks keep getting cheaper? And is there an arbitrage of opportunity for sharp investors here?
No, I'm sure. I think some of these companies, when you look at the dividend yield, when you look at the replacement value, when you look at the strategic value of some of those assets, surely, I mean, there is a trade, or I would say that from a technical perspective, one can surely look at that space. I think if the fear goes away that government would be selling in the form of ETFs or the OFS that we have been seeing over the last few years, I'm sure tactically there is an opportunity there. And the other thing that you talked about, I think there it's more about the faith in the potential of digital economy of India. We can discuss that separately.
Go ahead, tell me what you feel we should do in terms of the digital
So
economy.
you know what? I mean, it shows the opportunity, and I'm not commenting on that particular deal or that particular company, but you think a little deeper that what it shows you is how the world is looking at the digital transformation in India. This is a country which is going to become transform from most data poor to the most data rich society over the next few years. And we talk about it, whether it's e-health, e-education, e-governance, e-payments, e-commerce. I mean, you can add e-entertainment, e-judiciary, so on and so forth. We are already, in terms of per capita data consumption, we are much higher than US and China. This is the place where I think we can create what we have seen in Silicon Valley, what we have seen in China and some of the other countries. I think if policymakers, businesses, society all work together, we can really leapfrog. I think just like, I mean, you used to quote earlier about how we transform from, I mean, we missed the bus on the physical or the fixed line, and then the mobile revolution came. I think this can lead us to really transforming as a country in a very, very big way. And if data is new oil, then India will be the most powerful person in that OPEC, I mean, of the data related powers in the world, given the sheer size of the country and the role that we can play in various sectors globally.
But Navneet, let me
And I think
just
this
pick
is
your
what
brain
we
on
think
this.
hard. And several companies after this deal, several companies in the world would be thinking about what's happening in India and what are the opportunities in some of the other places. And I think we should definitely capitalize on that to the extent possible, because I mean, we are a capital deficient country, and at this point in time, we really need a lot of those savings.
But Navneet, let me just give you a follow-up question on this. While I agree we are data rich and data is the new oil, we're intellectually property poor. I mean, you're just going to import the platforms from America, whether it be Facebook or whether it be Google or whether it be Amazon, and we don't have any intellectual property where the real value lies. No IT company in India bid for the Reliance Facebook account, for example. Doesn't that suggest to you that we are short shifting ourselves and that we need to think about building intellectual platforms as opposed to just being a service led tech business?
You are absolutely right, and for that variety of things. So we have to ensure that we create the right ecosystem which has led to building of those trillion-dollar empires from like scratch in Silicon Valley, or what we have seen in China and some of the other countries. We need to ensure, I mean, that the right ecosystem, net neutrality, I mean, of course, cyber security, ensuring data privacy, and within those, how do we get talent into India? Not that there is a shortage of talent. I mean, millions of those people working for those organizations work in India, or the talent working in Silicon Valley is also Indian. I mean, in fact, I've written in last couple of months that can we find a way, we create a platform, we create such a ground in India where that talent will feel enthused to come back here and create those trillion-dollar empires from India.
Yeah. Navneet, let me get you back to what I called originally in my title speech, pandemic proofing a portfolio. Would you agree that in the 8 weeks through this crisis, the world has changed? And if yes, how has it changed? And what are the investment implications that you are doing to your portfolio, for instance, because of that?
So world is going to change meaningfully. I mean, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are days when decades happen, and we are in those days.
Right.
A capitalist in my mind think positively that there is going to be a creative destruction. I mean, we are going to see the best and worst of capitalism. We are also going to see the best and worst of socialism. I mean, universal basic income is there everywhere. The big government is back and is going to be even bigger. People will question the role of markets, but government will find it tough to provide solutions for everything, and that's why markets will be bigger. And there, I think the role of the third pillar, which is the community, I think that's also going to be very, very large. And it's not only individuals, companies, or sectors that will get impacted. Even several of the economies, particularly those who are dependent on oil, will get decimated. I mean, so the world will change in a very, very meaningful manner. Geopolitically, I have a very strong view that the Cold War between the West and China, which was there even before this crisis, will only accentuate, which means that there are two aspects to it. If you remember the Cold War, one was, I mean, the geopolitical aspect, the other was the innovation aspect. I call it the Sputnik movement, another Sputnik movement, where there's going to be a globalization of localization. Every country will focus on innovation, will producing locally, or diversifying the supply chain, etc. And maybe I think just like we saw in 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, the Sputnik movement, you don't know what kind of innovations are likely to come in next few years when there's going to be competition between China and some of the countries on one side and US on the other side. Healthcare will become the central piece of a public policy everywhere, not only the governments, but even the business leaders. I talked about the digital revolution. I think the best of digital revolution is ahead of us. In fact, I also have a very strong view, which I mentioned earlier about the fiscal policy. A huge investment will be made in physical infrastructure at some point in time, I think starting from next year, which again will create a lot of opportunities for India. I would hesitate to
respectfully, I've been hearing about this physical infrastructure in India for the last 30 years. I mean,
no, I'm talking about globally, not in India. I mean, so of course in India,
how about India?
Also, but even in Western world, you travel so much to US. I mean, you know the kind of their infrastructure. Where are you going to create jobs here? I mean, unless they really put big money into new railroads, new roads, new utilities, I mean, new kind of things, both on the social, physical, digital infrastructure. And there would be opportunity for India. There could be another Y2K moment for us in all of these spheres, whether it's digital, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the supply chain, or the new automation in manufacturing. Every company will look at reliability instead of optimization. We have optimized the supply chains a lot more. I think people are going to diversify. India could be a beneficiary. But I mean, we'll have to compete with everybody else. And that's what I mentioned about globalization of localization. So if we want to produce something here, we'll have to ensure that we provide them right kind of infrastructure, right kind of structure, right kind of ecosystem, so that they feel enthused about our demand potential, our demographic potential, and our long-term potential.
Navneen, how hopeful are you that we will be able to do what you say in a meaningful manner? The government, the regulators, the bureaucracy, the tax department, are we ready for this challenge?
I think everybody, the whole society has to rise to the occasion. This is our tryst with destiny. This is once in a lifetime opportunity for a country or for a society or for a community. This is something like that. Think about it. I mean, I think there is going to be an alliance. I mean, China would try that. They will buy maybe a costlier oil from some country who can align with them. So they're going to be like West versus China in a new alliance. In that, I think geopolitically, whether from Western world or look East policy from Japan, I think everywhere, everybody would be looking at these 1.35 billion people, the biggest supplier of labor force to the world in next 10, 20, 30 years, and a digitally rich society. Now, how much we can, so it's always, I mean, we have to remain optimist, but you know, whatever you say about India, the opposite is equally true. There are times in history where we squandered that opportunity. I hope as a citizen of the country, as an investor in this country, this time we don't miss it. And this is, as I again repeat, this is once in a lifetime opportunity for a country.
I hear you loud and clear, but for my viewers, let me ask you a few questions about your portfolio. Even today, I notice you're heavily overweight private banks. Why are you so bullish on that sector?
So, I mean, it was even before this. So, I mean, one is, I mean, when you look at the longer term opportunity, the formalization of the economy, digitalization of the economy, financialization of the economy, both, I mean, under-penetrated credit market, under-penetrated savings, production, investment products, etc. So there is huge opportunity. There is consolidation happening. I mean, some of these banks with capital, with good liability franchise, with right digital technology, risk management processes, management, etc., ready to grab market share from some of the other players who have a large market share, particularly in the public sector. Of course, in the very near term, the uncertainty, particularly on what kind of credit cost these people will see, I'm sure the valuations will remain depressed. But I think longer term opportunity is still very much in place for the top tier quality names.
Got that. Navneet, since the crisis began, in which sectors have you moved money in and which sectors have you moved money out of?
I mean, it's less of a large sector bet and more of a bottom-up bet. I think it's more about looking at resilience, if I can use that word, in each company. So you feel like anxiously excited, as my fund managers say. I mean, anxious for the obvious reasons. I mean, you know what kind of uncertainty lies ahead over the next 12 months or maybe 24 months. But you have to see in each sector, I mean, which are those companies which will not only survive this crisis, but will come out stronger after that. And in India, when you invest, a large part of the value comes on your, when you do the valuation on your Excel sheet on DCF, large part of the value comes from 2022, 23 and beyond. And I think identify those kind of sectors and those kind of, again, I mean, it may sound like a cliche, but good management, good business and a reasonable valuation. And today the valuations are reasonable.
It's the holy trail. We all look for that, all those kind of stocks all the time. But you don't necessarily favor large caps or small caps.
Yeah, exactly. So I think our focus is not about large or mid cap. In fact, I have a very strong view on this. When you have these kind of disruptions, and we have lived through what happened in like early 90s, and you think about, I mean, you were happy with a small cap or a micro cap Infosys versus some of the large caps. You don't want to take the names who were there in Sensex, or maybe in Nifty wasn't there in those days. And I think over the next several years, when you have these kind of disruptions, which we are going to see over the next several years in policy, in consumer behavior, in logistics, and all kinds of major technological disruptions, and then the factor markets will change dramatically. I think in that you are better off with companies that are nimble, that are agile. I think it's the adaptability which is more important than the size and stability, because size brings.
I hear you, I hear you, Navneet. You say be debt-free, be digital, and be agile. Those are the kind of companies that you're looking for. Let me just wind up the show with a very quick rapid fire with you.
I think so.
For that? Okay. A CFA degree or a CA degree?
I can add like sustainability, how companies are dealing with all stakeholders is something very critical we are watching. Sorry, go ahead.
You said that about ESG. Navneet, let me just finish up quickly with a very quick rapid fire round. A CFA degree or a CA degree?
I think CA makes you better in numbers, CFA makes you a better investor.
And you're both, of course, I might tell our viewers. George Soros or Howard Marks?
Oh, that's a tough one.
George Soros?
Soros as a philosopher, Marx as an investor. Soros I like as a philosopher.
Okay, but you got to pick one.
So I mean, these days, because Soros is no longer an investor, so Howard Marks. I mean, I like the whole theory about cycles.
Indian debt or Indian equity over 1 year?
That's a tough one. Both. In the very near term, duration will do well. I think rates will fall, but in the longer run, I'm sure I think equities definitely offer a good value.
Pharma stocks or FMCG stocks over 1 year?
Instead of pharma, I'll call it healthcare. Pharma is just one segment within it. I think globally, healthcare will be the focus of policy everywhere in the world.
Would you tell advisors to be cautious or active during this period?
So yeah, you have to be, like, as I said, anxiously excited. So you have to be cautious, but that also means that you ensure that you don't take the wrong decisions in these volatile times. It's going to be very volatile for next few months, but try to be on the right side of it. Take advantage of it. Don't get swayed by it.
Fair enough. Look at those companies that you mentioned: debt-free, digital, agile, perhaps debt-free. Navneet, just to finish off, I'll quote your guru to you, one of the persons you've admired since childhood, which is, of course, George Soros. George Soros said, when the situation becomes worse, the less it takes to turn it on the upside, and the greater the upside. I hope we've all reached the point of maximum pessimism, and we only see upside in the future. Thank you so much for being a part on the Wizards of Dalal Street with me.
Thank you so much, Ramesh.